Welcome to the Renegade Report. I'm Jonathan.
And Ramon is present. And sorry, listeners, it has been a while, but for goodness sake, it's like year end and I'm a struggling entrepreneur, so suck it. I need to make some money.
Yeah, it's year end, and let me tell you, the hospitals don't slow down either. In fact, they're probably about to accelerate with all the alcohol drinking. So, uh,
It's
yeah,
a good time to be
enjoy your festive season.
it's a good time to be an SAB shareholder. No, what are they called these days? Are they still SAB?
Yeah, it's SAB. What's the merger company? The American one, Anheuser Busch. So,
Anheuser-Busch. Oh.
well, something. I think it's combined in there. I don't know. I don't have SAB shares.
No, me
So,
neither. I'm too poor. I'm not enough privilege for that, I'm afraid. But anyway, Jonathan, let's get down to business. So we haven't been have a solo show in about 3 weeks, a month, and quite a lot has happened since then. So the DA
mm,
just
mm.
went like a full 180 out of nowhere, and John Steenhuisen is new leader. So listen, we met John on the show. Seems like a
Yeah.
good guy. Seems like a good choice. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I'm conflicted on John Steenhuisen, to be honest. As we say, we've met John. We've had discussions with John before, interacted with him on social media and, in other sort of formats. Um, as you mentioned, a nice guy, but look, a nice guy is not a qualification for being the leader of a party. Um, there's a guy in charge of America at the moment. Many people don't think he's a nice guy, but the figures seem to show he's effective. So, um, my concern with John is I do think he's what is now being referred to in South Africa as a classical liberal. I find that interesting because that terminology, 3 years ago, Ramon, was taboo. It was like, oh, what is that? There's no such thing. Even as recently as a couple of months ago, Jacques Rousseau, the famous ethicist from Cape Town, was making jokes about classical liberals and that it's not a real thing. So I think that's interesting that has now morphed. America's version of what liberalism is what our liberals see themselves as, our lefties. Um, and guys who support the original notions of liberalism are the classical liberals, and I think John fits into that box. My concern is not how he is as a person or his personal beliefs. My concern is how he translates that into leadership in the party, and I think there's some warning signs already with regards to how he has behaved, and with this notion of unity, because I think unity is very oversold. I really do. I think it may have a place in a Springbok team
Well,
to
let's
win a
be really
World Cup.
honest. South Africans love this notion of unity. They
Yeah,
absolutely adore it.
yeah,
They'll use any opportunity to make sure that, oh, unity is stronger together. We are one. Simunye,
absolutely.
etc. Like for the past like 30 years, it's
And
been
it's been
the
pumped into
dominant
the
narrative.
culture. It's been
Yeah.
pumped into the culture as well. I took a walk past the logo for the Gauteng province a couple of days ago and noticed, which I knew but I had forgotten, that the sort of tagline under the coat of arms is unity in diversity. So that's this stuff has been fed into the ether of our society. So people love this idea of unity, and those who push unity do so at every opportunity. So as I mentioned, the Springboks, people are going to say, yeah, but they won because they were unified. Yes, they were unified in rugby, folks, but they were not unified in everything. And I think there's a danger, certainly in a political party, to try have unity. You cannot have unity in the DA between people like Pumzile van Dam, and John Steenhuisen and Helen Ziller and Gwen and Gwenya. Those people all have relatively, some of them have similar beliefs, but some of them have completely opposing beliefs. You cannot find unity in that. And this broad church nonsense or unity is a major issue. You cannot unify. You have John Steenhuisen turning around to Makashule Ghana, who also was running for interim federal leader, and quite an adept sort of politician. I know many see him as very junior, but he has run a lot of campaigns over the years for the DA. He's been relatively successful in doing that. He was behind Musi during several of his campaigns. So this guy runs against John. In running against John, he just plays the race narrative. He basically pushes Herman Mashaba light, and then what ends up happening is he loses, and that's fine. And he's still a member of the DA and doing whatever he does. But John comes out and sort of praises the guy and says, let's work together and whatever. And I'm not sure that's the right way to go. Yes, you have to keep people within your party. Yes, you have to make all the factions happy and everything. But the DA needs, to some extent, a strong man or a strong woman to basically say, these are our principles. You buy into these principles, you're part of the DA. You don't buy into these principles, you're not part of the DA. And I only believe that Steenhuisen will be effective. I feel the same about Helen, frankly. If they say, these are our principles, these are the principles we are following, and that's what we are going to do moving forward, and we're going to be proud about it, and we don't care how many News 24 hit pieces happen as a result of that, we're going to go ahead with our beliefs.
All right. Well, you sort of have my view as well. You've just, categorized my view quite well. But let's look at context, because obviously that matters. He's interim leader, so he's not full leader. So I'm not too sure how many powers he actually has in terms of leadership at the moment. I know they're sort of in a state of flux because next year they're going to have a policy conference. And then I think once the policy conference happens and the policies are actually set out, then you can actually become a bit ruthless about those policies in a way. But it's, I've seen John on numerous channels this week, and I like John a lot. We get along quite well. I don't know him very, very well, but, from the podcast, we speak a little bit. And he's talking about redress and race mattering, but he's a non-racialist. And I sort of accept all that, but it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It really doesn't matter what things about race, things about redress. We just want a party that's going to fix this place at the end of the day. So we want strong policies, strong ideas, intolerance towards bullshit, and keep the ANC to account to a degree that it couldn't do so beforehand, and make sure that Parliament works. It's simple stuff. We had a stage in South Africa where, and this is ironic coming from me, it's not really ideological anymore. It is just about fixing crap that doesn't work, which is a lot. Do that first, and then you can sort of have ideology after the fact. Obviously, if you're ideological like a communist and want to fix stuff, obviously that's wrong, right? Because you're not going to fix it. The classic liberal capitalist, sure, you're going to fix it. But just fix it. Just have a very strong sense of what you are. Give people hope and give people, tug at their heartstrings about why you're right and why you're going to fight for them, and just fix the place. Worrying about race or redress, it seems besides the point at this rate.
I think on the fixing thing, you're right. That's what people want. They just want a country that kind of works, government get out of their way, all that kind of stuff. Just a point on the fixing stuff, though. The DA sold themselves in Joburg on being able to fix Cape Town and the Western Cape. Debates rage around whether they've really done that and whether Cape Town's kind of fixed for the middle class but nobody else and all those sort of things. But I think the people who live in the Western Cape are often don't sort of understand how fixed that province is in comparison to other provinces, because poor people drive on the roads like middle class people drive on the roads, and they are better in the Western Cape. It's as simple as that. The traffic lights do work. They don't in Joburg, and the DA sold on that. So just on the ideology point, in Joburg they aligned with the wrong people, and then they haven't been able to fix anything. And in fact, they've arguably broken the system even more. And so I think you're right. They do need to just fix stuff. And it's not so much about pushing any ideology or belief. But at the same time, if you align with the people who have the wrong ideology, so the EFF is a looting, thieving party, essentially. It's the economic freedom fighters. It's in the name, right? Freedom fighting is and economics. Those things are not about making anyone richer except the people who are in power in that party. So I do think that they need to be careful to not walk away too much from ideology. I get your point about context. You look at the UK at the moment. Boris Johnson is making a case for re-election. One of the things he's saying is that the Tories the Conservative Party are gonna throw billions of pounds more into the failing NHS, and that's not a conservative position at all. And Jeremy Corbyn saying things like Boris Johnson wants to sell the NHS to American companies, and Boris Johnson has come out very strongly to say that's absolutely false. Now, frankly, if he was a real conservative, he would turn around and go, we'll sell it to whoever the hell wants to buy it and can do it better. But he's not going to do that, because in the UK, there's such a level of indoctrination about the amazing nature of the NHS that he understands he has to embrace that. So I think that in South Africa, there are examples like that, yes, John Steenhuisen is not going to come out tomorrow and be like, right, school vouchers for everyone overnight. We're killing the taxi industry. Public transport is a joke worldwide. It never works. It always has to be government backed. We'll give you, I don't know, subsidies on your first car or something, or he's not going to come out with anything radical. I get it, because maybe we're not ready for that. And the context of South Africa is one of, decades, and this is before the ANC, because the Nats had leftist policies, decades upon decades of leftist policies. And so many people still buy the thing of government is my daddy. And I hear it, but I do think there are subtle ways to push back. And specifically on the race stuff, I know the race stuff is you just said it doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with fixing the problem.
Yeah, and there's this notion that, race is a proxy for disadvantage and all that. I mean, yes, to some degree, sure. But I mean, fixing or solving or alleviating poverty is not weird. It's been done throughout the 20th century for billions of people of all races. The Chinese have done it, the Indians have done it, some African countries have done it, the Europeans have done it, the South Americans have done it. Alleviating poverty is not new or different, and there's nothing special, with due respect, to poor South Africans where other policies from other countries can't just work here. We know what we need. We need rights to property, rights to trade, making sure that people are skilled and provide value to others. That's how you get wealthy. Like, it's not hard. And property rights, of course, but it's not difficult to do that. So talking about race is completely missing the point of alleviating poverty. I mean, if you just solve poverty and you only solve black people's poverty, like why? What's the point of that? There are poor colors, there are poor whites, there are poor Indians. Just solve poverty and poverty will solve itself. It's
also this sort of weird kind of thinking that, like, so fine. I mean, if any party in this country only wanted to solve black poverty, I mean, that would solve most poverty, because most people in the country are black, and most of the poor people are black, just, based on population numbers. It's a very simple calculation. But the ANC has been trying to solve, inverted commas, black poverty for their entire 25 years in power, and they haven't done that. In fact, they've done the complete opposite, because their views on how you alleviate poverty are completely backwards. As you mentioned, how you go about solving poverty has actually nothing to do with race. Look, this is all going to get very tired. The question is how many years it can continue for those who want to continue the race baiting argument. I can't see the white population in this country staying even a significant minority, frankly. I think you're going to end up with some diehard Afrikaners who are like, this is my land, and essentially everyone else is going to evacuate. It's already happening. This is happening across race lines, but there's a lot of white people who are leaving, especially those 40 and less. And, really, we're talking in 20 years' time of a white population, not of 5-6 million people, but probably of tending close down towards 2 million, maybe even 1 million. And even if they stay at the 5 million mark, it's a population that's not going to be growing. It's a population that's aging, as against the rest of the population, which will grow. So you're looking at maybe 5 million now out of 55 million, but in 20 years' time, we approach sort of 80 million people, and you're still going to have 5 million maybe. I'm not sure exactly the figures. I've spoken to some people. Russ Lamberti's view is that in 25 years, we may have as few as 500,000 whites left in the country. And so at which point do people carry on going, it's a race issue, the whites are the problem? How small does that population need to get before you're like, yeah, I hardly ever see a white. I'm not sure that they're the problem.
Well, I mean, don't underestimate it. I mean, how many Jews were there really, like in Poland or Germany? Like tiny fraction of a minority. But,
Sure.
people were still galvanized around the idea of like the elite minority taking all our stuff and creating all sorts of, crap for us. So, I mean, don't underestimate that thought or that characteristic
And look,
of
the
human
fixed
behavior.
pie. The fixed pie is also going to be always going to be an argument, because the socialists are always going to say, even if there's not a single white person left in the country, you're still going to have people like Irvin Jim saying things like, well, all the whites left with the money, that's why there's poverty now, and that whole sort of fixed pie syndrome is a real problem in thinking for a lot of people in leadership and power. So yeah, I just back to the DA.
Yes, please.
I really hope that they can say, look, it's not, they get this real difficulty with when they go on interviews and people are like, but you saying race doesn't matter, and they get sort of tangled up in these knots trying to explain what they mean by race not mattering. I almost feel like they should turn around and go, we're not talking about race anymore, because it doesn't matter. Like, we're not talking about it. If you want to talk about race, that's lovely, but we're not talking about it. If you want to ask us questions, we're going to go, we have no comment on that, and then you can run with that in your newspapers. Good luck to that.
Yeah. We're here solving problems.
You want to talk about people in poverty, you want to talk about unemployed people, we'll talk about those people all you like. The fact that they happen to be majority black, lovely. We're happy to help those people. And that's what they really should focus on. And I really hope they can move away from playing on the ANC and the EFF's field.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, as soon as you mention race, you play along with those narratives, which are very powerful and very strong and have been ingrained in South Africa for the past century, really. Everything about it. So actually, take the Morgan Freeman doctrine. Just don't speak about it ever again. Remember Morgan Freeman was on that famous show. It's like, racism. What do you think about racism? It's like, I just don't talk about it. It's like, what do you mean? Nah, like Black History Month or White Power Month or whatever Jewish entertainment month. Just don't talk about them. Like, they don't exist. And then it can actually solve things. So yes, the Morgan Freeman doctrine. That we should create a strategy for the DA called the Morgan Freeman doctrine. It's going to be very short. Don't mention race ever again in any capacity. Talking about race, though. My friends, listeners, and Jonathan Woods. Jonathan, you apologized for this already. But Herman bloody Mashaba, what?
I'll make another apology.
What the hell is going on? Just today, this very morning, Sichte Ngobese, Big Daddy Liberty, said, I remember the Herman who was non-racial, hated BEE, loved capitalism, and wanted people to be wealthy. Herman Mashaba retweets that and says, actually, that Herman never existed. And I'm like, you wrote a whole book about it. I've got it. It's called The Capitalist Crusader, about capitalism, non-racialism, and hating BEE. Like, you wrote a whole book. So, I mean, were you living in a daze or in a dream for like 60 years of your life? Then you joined politics, and now you're just an outright race nationalist. What's going on here, Jonathan?
Yeah, I honestly, I can't explain it further than politics. That's my best answer to it is Mashaba's not bowing out of politics. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think anyone who thinks that is probably mistaken, although I have been mistaken on Herman before. Perhaps he wants to bow out of politics, but always be a guy who people go to for comment and sort of have power in that kind of sense to be able to influence and manipulate. Look, I was completely wrong on Herman. I in fact, up until about a year ago, said that Herman would be a potential good replacement as the leader of the DA. And my view on that at the time was he hadn't gone race nuts. He hadn't gone sort of very sort of left on his economic policies at that time. So what he was reflecting was a relative strong man who didn't take shit from anyone, who was very staunch in his views, didn't back down just because something trended on Twitter or went viral, which is a good lesson for other people. And while some of his stuff was unpopular, it was certainly stuff that is popular with the average South African. So, for example, his stance on immigration. His stance on immigration is not popular in, the EWN newsroom. It's not popular in the ENCA newsroom. It's not popular to say things like, if you're here illegally, you must get the hell out. It's not popular to say we're going to get people out of buildings that they have illegally occupied. And even some people on our side of the aisle, the libertarians, are very anti Herman's stance on that. But I very much felt that the average South African, there was this zeitgeist, this feeling that he was tapping into. And I thought that whether you agree with it or not, if you want to beat someone like Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC at the polls, Herman Mashaba was a nice mix of a bit radical on those types of issues, but supported probably by a majority, and enough of a capitalist, a man who understands what it takes to fix things, a man who understands what it takes to make money and to create wealth, that would be a good combination. I have no idea what has come over him to this extent. He's gone. I mean, if you look at his tweets, it's just. I feel like Peter Howes has been reincarnated in the body of Herman Mashaba. Everything is about race.
But what is really? But I mean, it's something that cannot be explained in a rational manner. So I mean, the fact that he's leaving the DA is probably like the best thing that could ever happen to the bloody DA. To be really honest with you.
Yeah.
But it just Franz Cronier wrote a piece 3 weeks ago, whenever Herman resigned, and he called it, the cruel world of politics. I'm ad-libbing here, but like the world of politics just absolutely corrupts souls, and I think this is a clear example of that. Herman is someone who likes power, he has a big ego, and will just go to whoever can sort of fulfill that for him. And it looks like, unfortunately, the EFF did it. And this is obvious because the EFF keeps saying that they want to field a new candidate for Joburg mayor. And why wouldn't it be Herman at the end of the day? They had a very good relationship. Herman did a lot of EFF policies like insourcing people and stuff like that the city is not meant to do, like fix the traffic lights and potholes and make sure my rubbish is collected. Essentially, fix that first, then do your little ideological publicity stunts. But he seemed to focus on that a lot more than focusing on the day-to-day administration of the city itself. So to me, it's an unbelievable 180 on where he was and what he is today. And it would be very interesting to see if he would fund Musi's new party, perhaps, or join Musi in a sort of political party. But even then, Musi and Herman don't gel in terms of policies, not to a large degree anyway. So who the hell knows? So yes, we were wrong on that one. We thought Herman was pretty good for the future, but I mean, even no one could predict the sort of U-turn that came out of it.
Yeah, look, I mean, people need to understand. I mean, Herman Mashaba was a chair of the Free Market Foundation, he was the kind of guy who just till a short while ago would go to IRR functions and, would very much be fraternizing with the very people he's now calling racists. So it's an interesting turnaround. As I say, I think relatively political. I'm not saying he doesn't believe some of the stuff necessarily, but certainly there's a political move being played here, whereby he either wants some sort of power politically, or there's a political party or another appointment coming along or something. And it will be interesting to see. I do think he does come across, just lost on him, quite petty, to go after someone like Herman Pretorius. And, I like Herman. We've had him on the show. We've had good disagreements with Herman, so I don't agree with everything Herman says or thinks. But to go after, with due respect, a guy who is a sort of junior analyst at the IRR, as his main sort of protagonist or antagonist, is a bit laughable, and I do think that it shows Herman Mashaba to be quite petty.
Yeah, well, it's Herman and Herman, language. But Herman Pretorius was on ENTA against Prince Mashile. I don't know if you saw that, Jonathan.
I saw a short clip that everyone was freaking out about. Yes.
Right. So what is interesting? So Herman and I get along well. He's a debater. He's got a law degree and he does debates, and it's obvious. What is interesting in that particular interview, and I suggest you see it, is it's on John Steenhuisen elected DA, and they invited Prince Mashile, who's like this. What's someone who's like so obvious, like this politician who's like Deadwood, a political analyst rather, who's like Deadwood, like he gets invited all the time to speak, and no one actually like challenges him because he's just been there forever. Yeah. And then Herman was invited on, and he gave Prince such a hard time, and I thought, this is a little crack, in the window of reality, in the bubble of the mainstream media in a way, because these political analysts have been going on these shows for years and years and years without much opposition, without much rapport. It was just like a question of, it's a platform for them to speak about what they want to speak about. And Prince went on about the DA is now white, and the whites are taking power again in the DA, and they need a black leader to get black voters because the PAC has a black leader, and they got all the black voters as well, of course. And Herman came on and just said, you're all wrong. He's like, the emperor has no clothes. You're all wrong. Here's the data. Here's what we know. Here's what you believe about people that's wrong. And he just gave Prince such a hard time, and it was actually so wonderful to see a little crack in the matrix of mainstream media, where this guy comes on and like just gives facts and is arrogant and is unashamedly binary about it.
Yeah.
I don't care what
I
you
don't mean to at all downplay Herman. I think he's an excellent debater. He was on our show. We had a really solid conversation about China and trade. And he, every time he gets involved with that, and he certainly is threatening to the mainstream media narrative. He's threatening beliefs. He's taking people on, and you saw it. That interview had reactions from pretty heavy hitters. Herman Mashaba went after him. Ferrell Haffajee went after him. You've got sort of the thought leaders of the left getting very intimidated by a 25-year-old guy who, as I say, apologies, Herman, I'm not trying to play you down, but I am trying to draw the contrast between how much of an effect you're having. And that's the thing. He's a youngster, relatively young oak, who's relatively unknown in the media landscape in South Africa, goes on one interview and causes that much upsetness. And I think you're right. I think potentially cracks. I think the fact that people have never been challenged before, this dogma doesn't get challenged. I think not to take anything away from him, but I do think it also does show a lot of weakness on the other side of the aisle.
No, that's for sure. And keep going. I hope Herman becomes a sort of a staple of the talk show, not talk show, like the newsrooms around the country. Because, and we need more like him in a way. Just be less, Herman, I know you're listening, be less of an arrogant bullshit. People might like you more.
That's a maturity thing. Not as you get older, you and I have learned that to some extent as well. But yeah, I think there's space for everyone, Ramon. And even if Herman doesn't change one bit, that's perfectly fine, because, as I say, he's rattling the right cages.
Yep. No, absolutely. So SAA, there's a strike there, and we sort of agree on this now. But before, I was like, yeah, I support the strike. Like, they'll close down SAA, and They'll,
Yeah.
they will do what needed to be done 10 years ago, basically, just through ineptitude. And then you came along and you're like, well, it's maybe not the best way, to close
Yeah.
a huge company like that overnight with 50,000 employees, I think it is, or quite a few.
Something ridiculous. Like, it doesn't matter. It's in the tens of thousands, right?
Yeah, it's in
And
tens of
and
thousands.
and not directly employed will be a whole bunch of others. So what you won't see is so SAA Technical may not close necessarily, but they won't have as many planes to service. So they won't need as many engineers and all the rest of that kind of stuff. There's food catering businesses on the side that obviously cater to the airline. There's a lot of stuff that could happen. I hear the free marketers going, yeah, but if SAA closes, the free market will, come in and they'll take over those flights, and that may be true. My view on SAA is I think there needs to be nuance and a little bit of complexity here. I hear the argument for just shut it down. It's cost us billions upon billions, tens of billions of rands. They keep getting bailed out. Every time they get bailed out, it's anywhere from about 3 billion to about 12 billion rand every time that happens. And that happens often. It's not profitable, etc. I hear all these statements. I agree with them. And the argument for shutting it down wholesale is a relatively convincing argument. The problem I have is that I think that there is a contribution that SAA makes to the economy. I don't think that airline, and never have thought that airline needs to be owned by the government. And I think there's a way out of this, which will result in some job losses, obviously, but will maintain an airline which, frankly, in my opinion, has value to provide as a business. SAA owns several routes, which are lucrative routes. SAA was the largest airline in Africa at one point. They've been eclipsed very much so by Ethiopian. Guys, just think about Ethiopian. 20 years ago, you would never have gotten onto an Ethiopian Airlines aircraft. 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, Ethiopian jokes were like, your mama jokes. That was like the level that Ethiopia was at, and they've grown that airline to be a dominant player in the African market and the global market. I do think that SAA has value. Sell it for a rand. Sell it for a rand to someone who would buy it, not a whole bunch of people in government's friends. So not like, oh, we found a BE group who wants to buy SAA, where it's just more of these deals. No, sell it to someone who has an understanding of aviation. I don't care if they're a foreign company. I couldn't care less. Keep 30% as a government investment, so that there's some sort of, it's still South African in a
Well,
sense.
just basically, so you're just saying just do a telecom, right?
Yeah, I think it can be done. I think a turnaround is possible. Will it happen overnight? No. Will we probably bail it out, one last time or another time after that? Or will we have to pump some money in before that happens? Perhaps. If someone's willing to take it over, then they take it over with the assets and the liabilities. But government hasn't done this. Like, everyone saying close it down is saying close it down because government's options that they're putting on the table are close it down or keep it going and keep bailing it out. I'm saying do neither. Just sell it
Privatize.
and privatize it, and understand that an airline like that has the potential to be the leading airline in the country. It was once one of the leading airlines in the world. It's one of the oldest airlines in the world, so there is some nostalgia there. But I know that nostalgia is not worth your tax money. But I'd still think there's value in SAA, and I think that there's another way, and I get it. I get the frustration of just close it down because that's all that needs to happen. I also need to point out the other thing I said to you the other night when we were discussing this, which is that everything the ANC does, everything government does at this stage is just a looting strategy. That's all it is. So if you have SAA, then the way the government looks at the SAA is they say, all right, who can be on the board and who needs money? Like, which of our
Yeah.
friends needs a job?
No, it's
Right?
it's catered deployment 101.
Right.
I mean, they
And
don't
then
run these things like businesses. They run these things
exactly.
like
And then they
like
go, okay,
patronage networks.
the airline needs catering. Okay, who do we know that has a catering company? Or the catering company that we want is fine, but the catering company has to go through another company so that there can be a 50% kickback to our friend. And this happens along the way. So shutting down SAA will not stop the bleeding. All that will happen is they will find another area to loot. They'll create something called the Airline Empowerment Fund. And then the CEO of the Airline Empowerment Fund will be the highest earning public paid employee. This is the kind of stuff that the ANC does. If you think getting rid of SAA cuts our expenditure by 50 billion rand or whatever over every couple of years, it's not going to do that. It just won't.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I think SA could be an example of like nothing is too big to fail, and maybe the ANC takes that risk with one thing that's not really needed, like a national airline.
No, fair enough.
There could be a domino effect onto others, but I'm not holding my breath by any means. Sell it to Richard Branson. Fuck it, call it Virgin South African Airways, and people will flock here for this like sex tourism or something.
South African Airways as a brand isn't a bad brand either. They even now they don't rank badly. They're not amazing in terms of airlines. They're still top 50 in the world, which isn't terrible. They used to be one of the top 10 at one point. As I say, look, value. I hear the point. It's an entity to fly middle class and upper class people around. Does nothing for the poor. I hear that argument. It's a valid argument. But I just think that there's another way, and I would be hopeful that way could be followed. Your point is relevant too. Use it as Margaret Thatcher's sort of mining example. It's okay, we are ready to let the mines fail. So and same thing, we let SAA fail, we send a message to the unions, we break the back of the unions, and suddenly we regain control of Eskom and we regain control of all our SOEs. But do we really buy that?
No, not for now. But it would be very, very interesting. So 94, the galvanizing moment of 1994 was the Tripartite Alliance, which existed before 94, don't get me wrong, but that enabled 94 to happen to a large degree. I think the future of South Africa will be determined by the disintegration of the Tripartite Alliance. And the Tripartite Alliance are the unions, the ANC, and the SACP, the communists. And I think the easiest ones to get rid of now, or to sort of destroy now, will be the unions. They don't have a public mandate or a democratic mandate by any means. They're not acting like unions, they're acting like political agents. And they really are holding this country to hostage, like much worse than what Thatcher had. Well, maybe to a similar degree. But I mean, the unions are responsible for the intellectual genocide of school children in this country. They are responsible for 33% overemployment in Eskom and load shedding and all that stuff. They're responsible for the public wage sector bill. They're responsible for most things in the country. So the real people who run this country are not the ANC, in actual fact. They are the unions. But the unions don't have a public mandate. So why wouldn't a political party, starting with a D and ends with an A, choose the unions as their bête noire, as their enemy, as the villain? Because by attacking the ANC, you actually make the ANC seem a lot stronger than they really are. But if you ignore the ANC, you keep them accountable in some ways, but you sort of ignore them in the public messaging and you just focus on the unions, and specifically perhaps SATU to start, which is the Democratic Teachers Union, who are responsible for enormous injustices in terms of pregnant school kids, right? In terms of children, in terms of the teachers not being able to pass the test that they're right for the kids to pass, all that sort of stuff. Why wouldn't the unions be a great villain for a political party to have? And then by attacking the unions, you say, act like unions, not like political agents, or we will fuck you over. And that may disintegrate at least one leg of the Tripartite Alliance. So it'll become only ANC and SACP, and the unions will sort of be floundering on the side without much power or influence anymore.
Yeah, I'm on your page here. I think it's a good political strategy. I I cannot see the issue with it. The fact that it hasn't been made clearer to people that unions are the enemy of employment. That is something that should be very easy to translate for all South Africans. It should be very obvious. I think attacking SATU would be a good place to start because they have destroyed. Your terminology is is it intellectual genocide or
The intellectual genocide of South African children.
yeah, and I think that is 100% correct. Our education is down the tubes, both in the quality of that education, the attendance of teachers, other problems, as you mentioned, like teenage pregnancy, which happens often in relation to actual teachers who are impregnating these children. I mean, I don't know how hard it would be for government to just pass legislation that says if a teacher impregnates a child, that is considered rape, and thank you, cheers, you're out.
But
Um,
it really is law. The
um,
Children's Act
no,
of
no, yeah,
2005
I'm just
does
saying if
that.
you, yeah, I think though, not to get into the weeds too much, but like if it's a 16-year-old girl, then technically she can give consent, right? But I would use the left's power arguments against themselves here, and I would turn around and say a 16-year-old can never consent to her teacher, and I really do think that there has to be a very harsh consequence to these types of issues, at least until we've kind of got control of them. South Africa needs, in many respects, a Lee Kuan Yew approach to dealing with a lot of our problems. And the Lee Kuan Yew approach was, this is the way it is, and if you don't like it, you're going to disappear down a hole somewhere, or into a prison. And but it was very clear to everyone what the parameters were, and it was very clear that those parameters were for inverted commas goods. And I'm not sure who would make an argument against saying teachers that sleep with their students are are committing an evil. And let's debate about how we deal with that. At the moment, it's not being dealt with. It's just not being dealt with. I'm sure
No.
there's a couple of cases here and there where, if it's a minor and then it's obvious statutory rape, perhaps that is going on. But this is countrywide. I mean, this is all over the show.
Well, I mean, there's 6,000 alone in the Northwest, pregnant girls under the age of 15.
Yeah.
School-going children, and I'm not saying all the teachers there like sort
Yeah.
of rape them, but I mean, it's 6,000 just in one province. Imagine the
Yeah.
rest of this country.
Yeah.
It could be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands at this rate. We don't know. And that has all sorts of cascading effects later on in life. We know very well if you are a teenager and you have a child, school's difficult. It's difficult to study. It's difficult to get a job, especially as a single child, so to speak, or a single mother. All these things have cascading effects for the future.
Yeah.
Where people are just perpetuating the cycle of poverty because they just repeat the cycle of poverty.
Yeah,
And
look, South Africa's
no
got
one makes that argument.
we've got tough calls to make because some of the things we have to do are things we probably don't want to do. Liberals will listen to some of the things I'm saying and be like, how can you say something like that? I mean, here's a controversial one. We've got a whole bunch of school kids getting pregnant. So should 12-year-olds basically be given injectable contraceptives? Now, the average sort of liberal mind is going to go, are you absolutely out of your mind? That's something that you have to consent to. That's on an individual basis. You cannot force contraception on people, etc. But if I give you the choice between every 12-year-old gets an injectable contraceptive, so that basically they're covered for against pregnancy for their period of school. Okay, so yeah, sexually transmitted diseases, those things are still going to be a problem, but not kids. And the outcome is, if you're against it, we have kids who are still getting pregnant, 6,000 just in one province. Or if you're for it, we have a whole bunch of kids actually finishing school. And I would love to say, no, we mustn't do stuff like that. Education programs are the way to go. We need to just inform the children, condomize and all this stuff. Guys, we've had these programs for years. We even have some schools that have condoms available in the school. It's not working. It's not a solution. And part of the problem is a whole bunch of other social factors. A lot of these kids have broken homes. A lot of these kids don't have the right parental sort of influences because those parents aren't around, or because those parents themselves have grown up as kids who never had the right influences. These are some of the tough decisions we need to make as a country, and we need to deal with. To be honest, I don't hear any of our politicians talking about this.
No,
In
but I think it's
in a real
but
solution
solving
sense.
education and destroying Satu solves a myriad of other issues as well,
Yeah,
like crime
yeah,
and
yeah,
unemployment and a
absolutely.
few other things. So, I mean, focus, one political party only focusing on education. We want to have the best educated children in the world within 20 years, and anyone who steps in the way, we will absolutely destroy them.
Yes. Yeah.
That all?
I think that's a good policy. I think your strategy on targeting the unions, and specifically SATU to start, is a good way to go. I can't see the downside there. I really can't.
No, me neither. Me neither. Oh well, we'll we'll see where this goes.
Someone will hopefully listen to this and be like, okay, Jonathan's a bit like right wing, but Ramon, I kind of like his idea. We can only hope
Or
that.
perhaps in 2040, someone's grandchildren will listen to this. You see, they should listen to those guys. See, the solutions were there, but no one listened. Yes, yes, that's how we
Yeah,
feel. It's tough to be a genius before your time, Jonathan. I'm sure you wouldn't know, but
maybe we're
I believe it
completely
is.
off. As I say, some of the stuff I'm sort of playing with, and I do want listeners to bear in mind that these are kind of thought experiments. I'm not advocating necessarily, and I haven't investigated all of these policies, but I do think we need to start thinking a bit out of the box. We do need to understand the situation we're in and how dire it is. And you don't have a lot of time to react to educate a child. It's 5 years in high school. That's
Yeah,
all it is. That's your it's 5 years in high school, and it's probably those first 3 years of junior school where you learn the sort of foundations of maths and language. Those are probably the most influential years of education. So you've got 8 years, maybe 10, and you miss that. And if you think about it, since Jacob Zuma was president, that's it. That 10 years has been 10 years of completely destroyed education for that entire generation of children who are
yeah.
now going
And
to
what
be
has
worse
happened?
off for it.
What has happened since then? Unemployment has gone up,
Yeah.
crime has increased,
Mighty
more
Jamie is an
people,
analyst.
more
I mean, this
as
this is
standards
the
have fallen.
chaos we have,
Yeah,
you
but
know?
increased social grants too. Like all this is a consequence of a shit education system. So yeah, if anyone in the DA is listening, I'm available for a very, very high fee as a strategist.
Yeah, I double
All right.
Ramon's fee, that's mine. Um,
Typical
let's
Jew, man.
let's talk
Typical Jew.
let's talk about let's talk
Will
about
Brexit happen? Hold on, before we go. Will Brexit happen, Jonathan?
yes, but not in a way anyone will be happy with.
Okay, sounds like marriage. Okay.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, it will happen. I think Boris Johnson will win the election. I think he will have a relative majority, or quite a significant majority. And in the parliament, and as a result, he will get through his Brexit deal that he has proposed, which is essentially Theresa May's deal with a couple of exceptions and additions and subtractions to it. It's not a terrible deal, but it's not great. It keeps Britain essentially in the EU to a large extent. It does cede some of the control back into London and the UK itself, but it's not an ideal situation. It probably sets up a problem several decades down the line for where they have to either go again, are we part of this EU thing because we have to still follow these specific rules and those specific rules, but we don't follow these other ones. So it probably sets him up for another Brexit at some point, frankly, because it's not a complete Brexit. But I think that will happen. I think the majority of Brits at this stage are at the point of just do something. Just do something. Get it
Yep.
done. We don't care what it is. Make something happen. And I think that's what's likely to play out.
Yeah, we'll see. If the EU is happy and Parliament is happy, then you know that it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible deal. If
Yeah.
both parties are happy, then no one. It's the unity thing, right?
Yeah.
It's just the stench of appeasement, as Margaret Thatcher would say. Talking about appeasement, which is not happening, like America is like the last great hope of disunity, which we quite enjoy, so they're trying to impeach Trump on this sort of notion that he spoke to the Ukrainian president or prime minister, and he said, "I'll give you aid if you sort of like prosecute or investigate this oil company." Now, the transcripts have been released. It's not evident from the transcripts that that is what he said. But anyway, they thought it was a good idea to do so. So I've been paying a little bit of attention, but I follow very like right-wing fascist Americans. So it seems like he's winning. And I see clips on Twitter about the witnesses that go there. And it seems to me like everyone's saying, no, he didn't say quid pro quo, like at all. He didn't say, if you do this, I'll give you that. That doesn't seem to be the case. So,
Sure. Yeah.
but nevertheless, it might go through the House.
Mm-hmm.
So the House might want to impeach him. But if it goes to the Senate, like it doesn't matter. The Senate won't impeach him at all because he's got a majority there.
Yeah, this is my pet topic at the moment. I love this shit. So there's a lot. Firstly, to say, number one is Trump will be impeached. And you need to understand what impeachment is. Impeachment in the United States is a political process, not a criminal process. So you can impeach anyone. They could have impeached Barack Obama for wearing that tan suit. Okay, because all you need to do is you need to have an impeachment hearing like they're currently having. You need to interview witnesses. And then based on what happens in that hearing, a report is created and the representatives in the Congress then vote on it and decide yes for impeachment, nay for impeachment. The Democrats currently have a majority. They pretty much vote in a block, as do the Republicans. And you're going to basically see that the Democrats in the House are going to vote for impeachment regardless of what has happened in these hearings. And I'll get to that now. So impeachment will happen. Trump will be impeached. That will be what the history books say. But it will go to the Senate. And then the Senate has to either decide to find guilty or to acquit. There is no chance of the Senate finding him guilty. They need 66 votes to find him guilty of misdemeanors, high crimes and misdemeanors. They're not going to do that. That's not going to happen. The votes just don't exist in the Senate, even if you think Trump is wrong in this particular instance. And so Trump, this isn't getting Trump out of office. This is a political strategy that the Democrats decided on. So they were pushed into it by, to some extent, the squad. So Nancy Pelosi was pressured by the far left of the party. She never wanted to do impeachment. In fact, up until 3 months, I think, before impeachment started, she had said that impeachment could only ever happen as a bipartisan entity. And there's no bipartisan support of this particular approach. But she's been manipulated into that or pushed into it by the left of the party. The Democrats will vote and he will be impeached. He will be found. He will be acquitted in the Senate. But they will go to the 2020 election saying this is an impeached president who is guilty of corruption. They're going to sell it on corruption. They're banking on Warren being their nominee. Warren is very anti-corporate corruption and corporate greed and all that kind of stuff. And so corruption is going to be the 2020 campaign strategy. This may, by the way, not all work out because Warren may not win the nomination.
Yeah, but what is his strategy, though? I think this plays very well into Trump's strategy himself.
Yeah,
this is the Dems trying to, impeach the greatest president ever. Here's all the stats about unemployment and the stats about money and the stats about like power and social influence and international foreign relations and how well everything's going, and the swamp and the Dems just want to cut America at the knees by impeaching the greatest president that's ever lived, and that will work very well for him too.
Yeah.
Like I wonder deep down, I don't know how good he is at this, but maybe he wants to be impeached, like as a political strategy.
I think he values legacy. So I don't think he wants to be impeached because I don't think he wants to be one of the sitting presidents who was impeached.
Not impeached fully, but just the fact that they tried to do it.
even Congress having impeached him. But I look, there's a lot happening on the side. So let's talk about the actual impeachment. So I've said, like, look, he's going to get impeached. It's going to go to the Senate. He'll be acquitted. And this is the plan from the Democratic side. The Republican side is the witch hunt thing. It's the fact that they've been against him all along. And frankly, based on a lot of the testimony, that's showing to be true. So you've got this guy, Colonel Vindman, who was the National Security Council expert on Ukraine. He's a Obama holdover. In other words, he was from the Obama administration. Trump kept him on, as he did a lot of people. I think, by the way, that is Trump's biggest error he's made as president, is not getting rid of enough of the people who were openly against him. This Vindman guy has apparently been known to be a problem. They attempted to remove him from the National Security Council at one point because they believed he was leaking, which subsequently turned out to be the case. And so he testifies, and his testimony doesn't go well at all. And what it comes down to is essentially you've got, we all laughed at Trump when he was like the deep state. But these guys are sort of standing up and going, yeah, we are the deep state. We didn't agree that with Trump's approach to U.S. policy. Now, the problem with a statement like that is that U.S. foreign policy is solely decided by the President of the United States. It is not decided by anyone else. The only entity that overrides that is Congress, and that is with regards to declaring war. So when an intel officer who serves literally at the pleasure of the president turns around and says, no, well, we didn't agree with the Donald Trump's foreign policy approach to the Ukraine, that is basically divulging a lot of what is happening here. So Vindman did not come off well in the testimony at all. The Democrats have also, by the way, swung away from quid pro quo. So they've moved away from that terminology because they did testing and polling with various groups and found that quid pro quo did not poll well with voters. So they've chosen to move to bribery. That's their latest sort of, this is what they're going to get Trump on, bribery. So Vindman hasn't gone down well. Sondland, the guy who is the EU ambassador, has also not gone down particularly well. Sondland has turned around and said, Donald Trump has made it very clear. He even said in his own words, I don't want a quid pro quo. I want nothing. I just want Zelensky, the president of the Ukraine, to do the right thing. So these are guys, and these guys are all testifying under oath. So the chances of them telling tall stories is unlikely. The only incrimination so far, and remember the accusation here is that Donald Trump used his power as president of the United States to direct a foreign government to investigate the Bidens, specifically Hunter Biden, so that Joe Biden's 2020 campaign would be sunk. The only evidence for that so far is a guy by the name of Holmes who overheard a telephone conversation someone else was having. The phone was not on speakerphone.
Is that the whistleblower?
No. The whistleblower is a guy by the name of Eric Sierra Mella. I'm not sure if I pronounced that 100% correct. Everyone freaks out if you say the name of that guy. They won't say it on any major network, but it's been reported by Politico, I think. It's been reported by several major publications. Drudge Reports reported it as well. The whole way that's a whole another entity to how this came about and plays very much to Trump. But let's just finish on the Holmes guy. The Holmes guy overheard a conversation Sondland was having with Trump, where he claims he heard the word, the fact that the Bidens were specifically mentioned. That's all we've got. So we've got fourth-hand testimony.
It's called hearsay.
A person who's never met. It's like hearsay on top of hearsay, though, because it's a guy who's never met Trump, who heard another guy talking with Trump, who then spoke to another guy who had spoken to that guy. Like it's so far removed. Like you are more related to Kevin Bacon than this is. On the actual stuff, so there's an issue that comes in for Adam Schiff now, because if this goes to the Senate gets to interrogate all of this and how it came about. Now, it'll be interesting to see how that ends up. I think it'll probably be Lindsey Graham who ends up running this. But they can interrogate how this came about. And there's the potentially laws that have been broken in terms of leaking. There's also more play into Donald Trump's argument that it's a witch hunt, because what happened was, it looks like
Sorry,
Vindman.
Jonathan. Sorry,
Yeah.
it's getting a bit
Too
long in the
intense.
tooth. Yeah. No, the details are interesting, but I think for the listeners, let's just sort of like wrap it up quickly. I think it's not a slam dunk on either side by where this goes. The strategy is lacking in both areas, and Adam Schiff looks like he's been found wanting, because he's the one that's really been driving this thing. And he might get into trouble if it actually does go through and he's interrogated by the Senate on where he got his information from, basically.
Yeah. So essentially, this could cause trouble on the other side. And the last point to make is that this is in some respects a distraction, because there's a Inspector General report being released on the Russia investigation and how that all came about and why that came about. And it's allegedly is going to say things like the Obama administration tapped Donald Trump's phones, or not his phones directly, his aides on his campaign and things like that. Remember when Donald Trump said that had happened?
Yes.
And everyone laughed at him. So apparently it's going to confirm stuff like that. It's actually going to confirm that the Ukraine helped both the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton to try and smear Donald Trump in the 2016 election, and that there were several FBI people involved in essentially trying to derail the Trump campaign and subsequently derail the Trump presidency. And so that's very much being covered up. Just today, CNN reported that an FBI lawyer has been, I think, charged with changing documents to affect the Russia investigation negatively against Donald Trump. CNN did report it, but they didn't carry the report on any of their major shows. So a journalist at CNN wrote it up, but they buried it.
So it seems like the deep state and the swamp is a real thing after all. Who knew? I mean, this is going to be a great like political action thriller, like in about 10 years' time. I don't know who's going to play Trump, but it'll be cool to see.
I think as we've always said, 20, 30, 40, 50 years after Trump is going to be really where all the interesting stuff comes out, and
it's like now finding out about Watergate. Like we found it out 30, 40 years after it happened. So it could be a similar sort of situation. Who knows? All right. Anything else on your mind, Jonathan? I'm sort of done.
Yeah, no, I think that's about it for the moment. Nothing
just two things. Apparently, the expropriation amendment bill thing is going to come out very soon, and they're going to have comments over December. You know, when everyone's really busy looking at the news and being proactive, and same for the NHI. So I would highly recommend following the Institute of Race Relations. They're running campaigns on this, and they've got a submission policy there that you can submit your support or otherwise against these two bills to them, and they can deliver them to Parliament on your behalf. Same for Dear South Africa at Rob Hutchinson's outfit. And the ANC always does this. That the worst legislation always gets printed or for comment in December when no one's paying attention. They did it with e-tolls, they did it with a few other things, and now they continue to do it. But it's a new dawn after all, so hopefully they will change and they will, make it available early in the new year where people are paying attention. But obviously we doubt that. So just pay attention to those two things and make sure that you submit something against or in support of those two bills. Like actually just try to be a Democrat for once.
I think get involved and say something. Will it change much? We don't know. But obviously make your voice heard, because as Herman says, that's how democracy works. And we are trying to make it work in this country. Not very successfully so far.
No, not at all. But apparently democracy is important. I still have my doubts about it. I think it's a huge mistake all over the world.
A huge.
Massive.
All right, cool. So thanks everyone for listening. As always, you can find us on our social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, Renegade_report on Twitter, Renegade Report on Facebook page and group. www.renegadereport.co.za, and then /support-us if you'd like to support the show. Am working on quite a big international guest, hopefully coming on soon. It's been a long time in the works. I don't want to mention the name just in case it falls through, but hopefully that's going to happen in the near future.
Right, and the Giftness said he will join us. I'm still waiting for confirmation, but I think that'll be pretty cool. Jonathan can fight him, but I don't want to fight him. I think he's a creative musician. He has like
Yeah.
sort of funny skits on Facebook, and it'll be cool to talk about things that maybe aren't terribly political for a change. And we'll see the download numbers. Maybe that's really terrible. Then we never invite creative people on ever again.
Well, he's one of the guys who's gone woke and not broke. So let's find out how that gets done.
But is he woke ironically? Because I have a feeling that he is. And that's what the conversation would be about. Anyway, all right. Give us money. We poor. See you next time.
Shut up,
Cheers.
everyone. Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.